You know, Charles, I apologize. I forgot our lovely musical introduction.
That's quite all right.
It's always Sunday when you're here. It's Sunday with Charles, even on a Wednesday.
That's quite all right. Well, maybe we'll have, the music should only come on Sunday. And
There you go.
That's why I got the tie on. During the week, you know, you got to have a tie. Evidently you didn't get the message, but that's all right.
I don't have any ties handy. But Charles, there's so much information coming forward with regard to the Uranium One scandal, the Clinton Foundation, all the shenanigans that have been going on for so long that we just really couldn't wait until Sunday to have this edition of Sunday with Charles. So here we are, and you've prepared a ton of new information for us. It's astounding to me how, no matter how much information you present, each week there's a new laundry list of felony criminal activity to review.
Well, I mean, this is a great, the art department has done a fantastic job with this poster here, and I think hats off to you.
Thank you very much.
For having done this. But really what I think we have here is a conspiracy that has been operating at least for 30 years, if not longer than that, in which people in both political parties, in the Republicans, the Democratic Party, both saw in globalism, as we've talked several shows back, they both saw in globalism an opportunity to create an unregulated system where the payoffs would be far bigger than just serving the US market. You're serving the global market. You would have no control. You have the appearance of controls, but the reality of no controls of any kind, of the financial markets, of the political system, of banking or whatever. And as this took shape, first under George H.W. Bush, and then in the 8 very long years under Bill Clinton,
right,
where it seems now in hindsight that the Clinton team went inside the system, may have scooped out all kinds of secrets, both on opponents, on rivals, Democrats, Republicans, independents, and maybe business secrets as well, and then looped along under W. Bush, and then finally under Barack Obama for a long period of time. I mean, we are talking there about, what, 28 years.
It's really unbelievable.
Of this. And now we find ourselves, you know, as the pundits were all fond of saying, and I remember actually I went in to CNN to be interviewed in early June. We won't
Belly of the Beast.
Belly of the Beast. And actually, the producers and the various investigative team people that I spoke to were very professional. We won't get into the identity of the anchor, but you know, I was basically treated as if I were an idiot for suggesting that there was a very real possibility that, and when just side chat with this person, that if if Bernie won the nomination, he was the only person I felt that could beat Trump. And this CNN anchor, oh, you idiot. You know, of course Hillary's going to win. That's ridiculous. Right. You know, right. Trump. But anyway, so we have here the situation where it seems that the mainstream intelligentsia, in quotes, here in New York and Washington, LA, and elsewhere, was all certain that it was a lock, and that Team Clinton was going to be back in the White House.
Yeah.
And you know, I think we've talked about this before. Again, we'll keep this person's name out of it. But I was lectured on Election Day by this very famous person about how, you know, you've had your run, Charles. You've been exposed in this Clinton Foundation. It's never going to get exposed. You know, there's a blue wall. There's no way for Republicans to win the Electoral College. It doesn't matter. You could put up, you know, an idiot in the Democratic Party.
which they may have done.
Yeah, and still that idiot would win. I mean, that was basically the thinking. And then at some moment, you know, someday maybe somebody will come forward, you know, and tell us all what really happened in that suite. Oh yeah, that book.
I think never came early this year, Charles.
Yeah. Somebody might come and tell us what was really going on in that room.
Well, you know, you bring up what happened, and the book has been glowingly reviewed since the last time we spoke about it. Should we?
Well, I just want to finish this one thought, and then we'll go into the what happened thing. So what we're going to talk about today are more elements and contours and context for what seems to actually have happened, that maybe at some point on election night, somebody realized, my goodness, Donald Trump is going to be the next president of the United States. And that somebody, was still most likely working for we the taxpayers, working in the executive branch. And that somebody may have stepped up the game of trying to spread very damaging information about somebody who had just been elected against everyone's expectations to be the next president. And as the returns came in and it became clear that no, Republicans weren't going to lose power in the House and lose power in the Senate, that somebody in that group of somebodies, it's likely, went around saying, we have to stop this, because if we don't, we're going to be in big trouble.
That's a group of somebodies.
Would possibly include these 5 people, and there's shadowy figures in the background. There are probably a lot of other people, Republicans and Democrats alike, who said, Trump's in there, he's got his own team, we have got to get him on a road to impeachment as quickly as possible, because if we don't do that, and he is successful getting into the swamp and draining it and exposing the full extent of the criminality at the Clinton Foundation and its long passage over 21 years, and the fact that it involves the Bush family, H.W. and W. Bush, and many other Republicans. If we don't stop that, then, it could be a very dim future for these 5 people and other people. And we include in here Comey. It's interesting, when I last year was doing a lot of work and talking to a lot of people, one of the great people I spoke to was Judge Andrew Napolitano, who I consider to be a person of the highest moral character and very smart, very decent person, very helpful to me. And I asked him, what did he think of Comey? Did he trust James Comey? And he did not say yes immediately. He said, it was a legal answer. And I didn't know what to make initially of the reports last year that, James Comey is unlike in other investigations when the FBI director doesn't take personal interest in it. He is on top of this one. I heard that.
The email investigation.
Yeah, the email, and if it touches the Clinton Foundation. When I heard that, I didn't like to hear that at all. I found that to be unusual. And then now we're learning every day and every week and every month more and more that, unlike a typical FBI investigation where you get hauled up in front of the special agent and they're going to say, listen, Jason, we're going to ask you some questions. And before you answer the questions, let us explain to you this federal statute and that federal statute and this federal statute, all of which say that if you lie to an FBI agent, you are compounding your problems bigly. But they didn't set it up like that for Hillary. They gave Hillary's people immunity deals that seemed very strange. They allowed some of these people who might have been targets of an investigation to be present with her and to conspire with her. They didn't put her under oath. They didn't take notes. And it appears that Comey was drafting, several weeks, months before this, was drafting exoneration memo. I mean, it reeks. And especially reeks because James Comey, it's not like he came, landed on an alien spaceship, last week and got involved for the first time in American politics. He has a long record of being at the center of controversies going all the way back to Whitewater, where he was, I think, on the team that was looking at Whitewater.
Really?
Yeah, and you got to ask, he had a long career in justice, and you got to ask yourself, what Americans expect here, and I think what the world expects when they look at America, is we expect a system where there's a set of laws, and they do apply whether you're Bill Gates or a beggar on the street. You break these rules, the same penalty should apply to you whether you're a titan or a beggar. And
let me pause you for a second, Charles, because you're raising a lot of really important points. Now, first of all, you're talking about the historical behavior and performance of the FBI with regards to investigating and all this. And of course, last week we had the JFK files come out. I don't know how many people in the modern sort of news audience are aware of just how corrupt J. Edgar Hoover was. And he was, of course, the FBI director when the JFK assassination happened, widely regarded as being pivotally involved in the cover-up. It's now known, after his death, that he was receiving bribes. He was the director for something like 42 years. He would go and do investigations into the personal lives of politicians and people who weren't necessarily criminals to have blackmail material on them. And he would prepare dossiers. I spoke about this, I think, yesterday. He had a dossier on Kennedy before he was nominated, and he gave it to his good friend Lyndon Johnson, and it included information about Kennedy having an affair with an East German spy that they used, for Johnson to leverage his way into the vice presidency. And I think that people just sort of had this notion that, the FBI is all on the up and up, but it just seems like we've gone further along in that corrupt direction. We've got two very corrupt FBI directors here. I think it's time that the FBI come under investigation.
High time. And when you mention those secrets, as a guess, the first thing that happened once Bill Clinton, got settled in the Oval Office and addressed any of his personal urges, was to send people into the various places and say, all right, you were in charge of this, now you're out. You were in charge of this, now you're out. My guys are going to go in. And they looked, as a guess, at those files. If J. Edgar Hoover had such files and they were still something that you could see, I bet you the Clintons vacuumed up all that kind of stuff.
Well, as you may recall, Bill Clinton fired William Sessions, who was the director of the FBI at the time, and he did it one day before the discovery of Vince Foster dead in Fort Marcy Park.
Yeah, that whole period needs to be looked after. So when the Constitution was established, the business of America was farming. It wasn't, that was basically, and fishing maybe. It wasn't like we had, General Motors or you name it, General Electric. So the framers hadn't really thought through how corrosive a big multinational set of enterprises, be they investment, manufacturing, whatever, defense, drugs, etc., how corrosive that, and how big the economy could become relative to the size of government. So there really isn't a system of checks and balances here. And, you look at all these top government people. I think Bill and Hillary have set a horrible example, taking what Ronald Reagan ill-advisedly did after he left office, taking gifts of the home in California, in Brentwood, and wherever it was, Bel Air, and the fancy speeches. I don't think the President of the United States should be in a position where that person can be bought with promises of what they may get in their post-presidency. That's a very bad situation, and there's too much temptation there on both sides, on the president's side and on the donor side. So you look at this whole system and the practice of the great public servants working in the Department of Justice, slaving away, trying to go after these rich firms that may have broken rules. And on the other hand, they can leave that service to make millions of dollars a year as a partner at a law firm. And where is the check and balance there? These crooked politicians can get judges appointed, that they may make corrupt decisions. And anyway, so this whole situation here we're now almost a year after the election. Yeah. We have the spectacle of Bob Mueller, who certainly in portions of his career has exemplary accomplishments. I think he was an Army captain, he was Purple Heart, etc. But he did end up working for Wilmer Hale. And Wilmer Hale is, one of the key partners at Wilmer Hale, from memory, is that lady Jamie Gorelick.
Oh.
And
Boy, she keeps coming up.
Yeah, and this whole chain of events wherein the dossier started, Paul Singer was paying for it. Paul Singer was paying for research, and then at a certain point that project morphed into a project to find dirt on Trump. We need to really understand that. That's a book that what happened really needs to be written. Yeah. And specifically what we need to understand is what happened from the moment in time after Donald Trump was declared the victor what happened from that point forward, minute, by email, by telephone call, by meeting. How did the information in the dossier get augmented? How did it get circulated? How does it relate to the unmasking? And what were the communications and roles of Hillary, Bill, and Chelsea and others around the Clinton Foundation to Comey, to Mueller, to the various people around the dossier, to Steele, to Podesta, both Podestas, John and Tony? How did all that work? And what about the communications with the UK and the Steele guy, who he's characterized as being a retired MI6 or whatever it is agent.
Right.
And what I heard this morning on a broadcast was that there is no such thing, actually. And
well,
this
we
guy
hear
was
that all the time, right? CIA, MI6,
Sure.
they never retired.
Sure, and it's not as if this was just some ordinary dude. This guy Steele was in charge of the Russian desk of MI6, and the Clintons were heavily involved promoting this idea of Skolkovo, which was this sort of Silicon Valley project out somewhere in Russia, with a lot of American firms wanting to get the top research scientists in Russia, of which there are some very brilliant people in Russia, and the Russians, of course, wanting to create companies and billions and tens of billions the way we do in Silicon Valley. So that whole area of, the period when Hillary was Secretary of State, when Bill and Chelsea were running the foundation in gross violation of the law, as James Comey was in theory, his FBI was in theory investigating various deals, suspect deals, touching on the Clinton Foundation, but not bringing those investigations home.
Yeah.
The connection, the fact that, Mueller was investigating and then Comey, the fact that, Mueller would have some role, I imagine, in selecting Comey to succeed him, and that anybody would believe that it makes sense to allow Robert Mueller to have an unsupervised fishing expedition that now has resulted in, we'll get into it, an indictment having nothing to do at surface level with Russia, with Trump. I mean, we didn't set the system up in this country. I'm not a lawyer, but we didn't set the system up so that what we want to try to do is appoint somebody to be tormentor-in-chief of all Americans, and have unlimited, financial resources. The incredible power the FBI does hold over you when they decide to go from a matter to an investigation. Then the Department of Justice and these rogue prosecutors, no oversight, no checks and balances. I mean, that's not what any thinking person, who believes that they should vote for that needs to think a lot harder about it. Because now it's Donald Trump who's under the finger of Mr. Mueller in an unsupervised, unchecked way. Tomorrow, it could be, somebody else. It
could be you.
It could be me. It's going to be you, but it could,
yeah, easily.
Anyway,
but it is scary to think about these things, Charles, because, this is we're looking at, this is basically the conspirators or the top
Some of them,
level,
yeah.
Some of them.
Yep.
And the way they've positioned these two guys to be, it's the same MO the Clintons have used since their days in Arkansas. Bill became the Attorney General because controlling the Attorney General is very important. I forget the guy's name, but there was a coroner in Arkansas who they controlled, who used to rule decapitations and multiple gunshot wounds as suicides and things like that. And they control the investigator. So everyone, whenever, back in the past when I would talk about Vince Foster or whatever, a lot of people would say, oh, it's been investigated. Whitewater, you brought up, has been investigated. But just because it's been investigated, I mean, that's their method. Conduct an investigation, conclude the investigation, have an official finding, and then that's what happened, for lack of a better whatever. But the idea is that's part of the pattern and practice, is the manipulation of these investigations. And so many people seem unable to accept that as fact.
Right. But unfortunately, why don't we take a quick second? We could get into the reviews on what happened,
Sure.
And then we'll move into the other stuff if you want.
Absolutely.
Because every once in a while, since we did spend that time at the opening there, and we got what, 30 feet. I got 30 feet away from Hillary, and you got closer.
I think I shook her hand, or I spoke to her certainly. Asked her what happened that allowed Imran to conduct a spy ring in Congress, and she giggled. I'm glad she thinks that's funny. So Charles, it's an interesting thing. The Jeff Bezos owned and CIA controlled Amazon.com has so many positive reviews for your new favorite book.
Well, yeah, we look at if we go down here, 2,543, 79% are 5-star reviews, and 12% are 1-star. Now, let's just look at this for a second. This is a showcase of inequality, right? I mean, in a normal distribution, if you should have 20%, in each category. Here we have, of the 2,543 people who bought this book and reviewed it, 79% are 5 stars. And actually, as I look at this math, it doesn't work, right? Because if you just quickly in my head, 80% 5 stars would give you 4.0, right? And if you add up the other math, it's not going to get you up to 4.7.
How did they do that?
I don't know. They had the same accountant, who did the Clinton Foundation books, do this math. Because I can tell you, just looking at it right now, the mathematicians in the audience can confirm. There's no way it goes to 4.7, right? So that's crooked right there. But then the funny thing is, now Jeff, here's a word of advice. You don't need any advice. You're so rich. Instead of spending the time, that you're doing trying to colonize other planets and stuff like that, you might want to change the algorithm on these customer reviews, because what they're doing is humiliating you. If we go down a little bit further here, the top customer reviews. These are the reviews that are supposed to be, the number of people say they're very helpful. Look at the first one, a 2-star review, right? I voted for Hillary, I bought the book, I read the book, 2 stars generally, what I think of it. But it's a 2-star review.
Well, but how does a 2-star review get up there? I mean, it's only 2% of all of the 2,500 people.
Well, the point is the algorithm, then it says, it asks you to comment on the reviews. And it lists the ones first where the most people have commented. So the fact that 6,453 people loved this 2-star review.
Well, this is also one of the top 100 reviewers in all of Amazon.
Top 1,000, yeah.
Oh, top 1,000.
And then we go into here, review, deleted again. 17,000, this is a 2-star. I wrote a verified person, it's been deleted 3 times. If Amazon doesn't like what we have to say, don't ask for input.
You know what, we've seen this person before in our previous broadcasts, talking about how they've been deleted.
And then this one, here's a 2-star, 14,000. It was everyone else's fault. 17,000. What happened to the negative reviews? 5,000.
I love it.
You just go on and on here. So, I mean, you can't even, as we said before, I mean, Hillary Clinton, couldn't win the primary the first time. She couldn't win the general the second time. She rigged, she couldn't even effectively rig the general election. She can't even rig a book review.
It's really bad.
This Jeff Bezos, you got some smart people over there at Amazon. I happen to know some of your big shareholders, other than you, of course. This is an embarrassment to you. You obviously fixed these reviews. And I've read the book. The book is dreck. It doesn't explain, it's not particularly well written. It doesn't explain anything. There's no humility in the book. I wonder what the real sales are. I wonder how the contract was organized. I wonder actually who wrote the book.
Well, there were a number of really great and funny quotes in it that I was able to use in our Mrs. Bill animation.
Right. I think somebody, I thought that Mrs. Bill animation was fun, and I'm surprised that so few people have actually watched it. I wonder maybe they're rigging that as well.
Maybe Mrs. Bill wasn't fond of that, so she somehow got her friends at Google to prevent people from looking at it. I don't know.
Well, why don't we jump back into the, that one.
Mr. Manafort.
Now, I gather that these links will be available to the crowdsourcers.
Yes.
So at this important link, you can take a look at the 31-page indictment. And for me, my takeaway of this indictment was, I had several takeaways. The first is that the investigation of Manafort by Mueller has been ongoing for, 5 or 6 months.
Quick work, huh?
And it shows you in 5 or 6 months what the FBI can do, what the U.S. attorneys can do, Justice Department can do. If they get serious about something, they can actually, if you get the full indictment here, this thing, here's the indictment. Now, what I've learned through this process is very interesting. If you look see in the upper right, criminal NO period, that gives you the federal statutes. In this case, it's a federal complaint. The ones that they focus on or they're charging the defendants under, right? Mm-hmm. And this indictment is worth reading. We have the reaction in a second. We'll take you to it of a very experienced former federal prosecutor, somebody I highly respect. But just looking through this indictment, my first reaction to it was, after I got through a bit of it, was to say, let's just globally replace Paul J. Manafort Jr. and Richard W. Gates III with Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea Clinton. And many of the crimes that are alleged in here, obviously the text is going to be different, but the time frame is actually pretty similar. The specifics will be different, but the principles are the same, with one important difference. Manafort and Gates' work, as alleged in this complaint, or this indictment, has to do with for-profit activity, right? He wasn't going around the world with anybody saying, please contribute to, a charity. He was getting hired to do work, which we can debate a lot of different, we could debate whether the work was really lobbying or whether it was whatever else it was. But during a longer period, indeed from October 23rd, 1997 to the present, the Clintons, and later involving Chelsea, have been at all times soliciting donations, principally across state lines, using telephones, using the mails, using the internet, at moments in time where their important public filings were false and materially misleading and omitted crucial documents. So in addition to all the stuff that may be in here, and additional federal crimes that are not in here, you could look at this and you could say, all right, Mueller took 5 or 6 months with a big team of people, unchecked, and he comes up with this indictment. And my first reaction is, Bob Mueller was head of the FBI from the 4th of September 2001 until the 4th of September 2013. And James Comey was the U.S. attorney tasked from early 2002 forward to investigate the Clinton Foundation. And by August, I want to say 28th or 31st, 2004, notes in the FBI vault file show clearly that a team of people thought they had a fantastic case to go against the Clinton Foundation. It took them a lot of extra time.
What team of people? Well, team of FBI people?
Yeah, the FBI vault has meeting notes from FBI agents, of U.S. attorneys. It doesn't give, in some cases it gives the names, but most of the names are redacted. And it shows that after all those years and months of work, they were ready to go.
And we said no.
And we will know, we will be taking you through on Sunday the details of what was really happening, because we have those details, that the crimes were escalating in that moment at the Clinton Foundation. And yet, crazily, right around August 31st, 2004, a decision was made to stand down. And it involves these same people who are now rushing to get Donald Trump. And just for that alone, even if we were to say, we're going to give a pass to Trump, we're going to give a pass to Clinton, we're going to give a pass to Manafort, just for that alone, the appearance of the conflict is so great that just like these JFK papers, what we're setting ourselves up to do here by allowing this to continue in this way is we're going to create a result that nobody will like.
Well, it's already there. It's so shocking to know the extent to which this kind of criminal activity was going on, and now the very same people that were directly involved are supposed to be presiding over the prosecution of these other situations. It's so shocking. I just don't understand how people...
So if we go to the next one there, now this is Andy McCarthy. Andy McCarthy is, I think, a brilliant individual, great writer as well. He prosecuted the original World Trade Center bombers in 1993 as a federal prosecutor. This is a column that is a must-read, must-share.
This is the National Review.
And it's best for you to take, not for us now to do it, but for have people in the crowdsourced community read this carefully and note the many objections that Andy McCarthy has. And you'll see he's going to be regularly calm. He was on last night, I think, on Fox, and I'm sure he'll be on probably tonight talking about it too. So, excuse me, there are many aspects of this indictment that are questionable. McCarthy, in a nutshell, believes that it may have been just a first step, that they want to get something out there, and then they're going to do a superseding indictment, bringing in mail fraud, tax fraud, wire fraud, etc.
For Manafort.
For Manafort, because those crimes, I don't think, are specifically addressed in the initial indictment. I would note that in the Clinton Foundation case, in the many affiliates, you have bank fraud, wire fraud, mail fraud, in my opinion, not as a lawyer, just as a reader. So this is something that I would definitely recommend the crowdsourced community read in some depth. We could go on to the next link. Now, this is an interesting case out of Russia. They cite the fact that they refer to, I think it's spelled Y-U-L-I-A, but it might be pronounced Julia as opposed to Yulia. I forget. Tymoshenko is referred to as the former president of the Ukraine when she wasn't. And Russia's foreign ministry is saying, how do you make a factual error of that type in an American complaint? I mean, shouldn't it, it's the prosecutor is supposed to be trying to get you on a crime, and shouldn't the complaint actually be accurate? I think that's a fair point.
This person was supposed to be the president?
She was.
Wow, she's so young.
Nah.
She looks younger than that.
She looks young. She's not that young. And that was her trademark hair, and she was the one who was jailed after. Anyway, a better point, we don't have the link up, was made by Jerry Corsi in an article where he points out that there are issues. There was the no-knock pre-dawn raid on the Manafort house, where a lot of papers were taken, and it's Jerry's belief that Manafort and others will fight against use of the evidence in that raid, which I think formed the basis for the tables that are in the indictment of how much money Manafort spent on landscaping and men's clothes and this and that. Those details, I think, were obtained as a fruit, as a poison fruit of this no-knock raid, and so there's going to be vigorous contesting of that.
There's no knock, they just busted in?
It is at 5 o'clock in the morning. I mean, what you hear in the commentary is that if you have if somebody is under suspicion and has a lawyer, and the defense counsel is cooperating with the FBI and making information available, it's very unusual for the FBI to make a decision. Okay, we're going to bust the door down of this guy's house in the middle of the night and scare the hell out of his family and then rush through and sweep the papers out of his house that they want to take, including papers that maybe were not papers that they should have taken, that are attorney-client privileged communications. You're not allowed to seize that sort of information. So anyway, there's some question marks around that.
Wow.
This is a very important piece, again, in Politico. And Politico, I wouldn't characterize as being a conservative operation. It's if anything, it leans to the left. But it makes the obvious point here that Tony Podesta's sudden downfall, and it's rumored in the indictment they have Company A and Company B are mentioned. It's rumored that one of them might be a company called Mercury, which I think is a similar lobbying operation involving somebody called, I believe, Vin Weber, who is a Republican. And then, this Podesta group. This is an article basically explaining that firms that engage in lobbying have got to be far more careful, perhaps, than they have been. And then we get back to this infamous Doug Band memo, and the contention I made in the last Sunday show that that's a whole area that, this firm FD and then FTI and then DK and then ultimately Teneo are firms that look to me as if they are performing lobbying services, but doing so outside the normal legal structure, characterizing their work rather as financial advice or communications advice or whatever. And it looks to me as a bold attempt to get around this area, which again needs to be the regulation of this stuff needs to be brought into the 21st century. We have to have tighter controls.
Legislation about lobbying.
Well, in this case, it's called registering as an agent of a foreign principal. So you see the Foreign Agents Registration Act. If an American person or somebody living here is acting as an agent, and that's defined in FARA, is acting as an agent of either a government or a company controlled by foreign people, then you have to register. And and then the defense, of course, that they originally came up with, people were saying this is an overreach, was that not many people have been prosecuted under this act. That to me is, not many people have been prosecuted for murdering 15 million people yet either.
It doesn't mean
it doesn't
do it.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, the reason not many people have been prosecuted, one might argue, is that the people who engage in this behavior understand the severity of it, understand the conflicts, and choose to follow the law. So you don't have to prosecute them. So this is now, because the United States remains a consequential market, the biggest market in the world, because we're a big military power, because a lot of the nations of the world, want to find favor with our government or prosper inside the United States. It's certainly natural that foreign governments, many of them operating in countries that are far more corrupt, if that's possible in the United States, would think that by bringing a big black bag of money to somebody who's connected to either a current government official or married to a government official or going to be married to a government official, that big black bag of money, or that whatever it is, fee or this resource contract, is something that would curry favor. And so this whole area needs to be scrupulously monitored.
Now, Charles, there's been a lot of talk about Tony Podesta leaving the Podesta Group, but we haven't heard quite as much about the Podfather, John Podesta. He had a little bit of like a Twitter explosion, I think yesterday or the day before, where he was getting all crazy, crying about how he's now the target of a presidential smear campaign. I mean, what a loser, right? Let's talk about him for a second.
Yeah, I mean, this whole Podesta Group, if you go into John Podesta's and Tony Podesta's long history, I suppose it's a nice thing that the brothers are friendly, and supposedly they meet every Sunday for dinner and they swap stories and this and that. That's great. But the thing about what we can see from the Podesta WikiLeaks files, from the Democratic Committee files, from the Secretary of State emails, we see that John Podesta is everywhere. Mm-hmm. He was a senior official at the tail end, the worst period of the Clinton presidency, a period when the Paula Jones suit advanced, really just as the Clinton Foundation came into being. That's when John Podesta was right there in the center of things. And afterwards he goes and does what he does. The next thing you know, he's around the inquiry into the Clinton Foundation and the time of the infamous Bann memo. Mm-hmm. And next thing you know, he's going to be was leader of the Clinton campaign. This is somebody who is, he seems to be an expert at catching bad luck, but even better at making sure that the bad luck doesn't come home to roost in the form of indictments or prosecutions, et cetera. So, I mean, I think Americans deserve to know. One of the things that I'm struck by in this whole thing is that in the private sector, I'm aware that there's a vigorous contest between buyers and sellers that results in a market level price normally.
For anything.
For anything. And you can get into the area of art and scarce things and one-of-a-kind items where maybe they're crazy prices. But generally speaking, there's a vigorous contest, except with anything having to do with the Clintons, and the Podestas. I mean, you have these, who pays $12 million for a 36-page report? Okay, and if it wasn't just a 36-page report, it must have been, some of those extra features that we don't yet know about. Those must be considerably juicy. So, and who pays for all these speeches? Who gets these ridiculous book advances? Who gets this special deal in Jewel Unlimited that John Podesta appears to have failed to disclose properly, then transfers to a family member? If those WikiLeaks papers are in fact accurate, and no one has so far shown that any WikiLeaks revelations are inaccurate. They're all 100% success rate.
You would think if there was some factual inaccuracy there, they would challenge it and say, hey, that's not real.
Well, and I think that the reason for that, I suspect, is if you set a real investigative team on this to say, all right, with regard to what was going while Hillary Clinton was president, we want to check every single loan and loan guarantee
they don't want you doing
from
that.
The IFC, the World Bank, every single contract coming out of the State Department. We want to know the name and the ownership of every vehicle, and we want to see the timeline of all that, and we like to see the email communication. Whoops, those were on a private server, and we don't have it. So we want, if you went into that type of exercise, I submit at the end of the day, by getting restitution and going through the court processes and really turning on the people who engaged in that corruption. If it went to Obama, if it went to Valerie Jarrett, went to Eric Holder, or went to their wives or partners or whatever, you go after them too. You could significantly reduce the budget deficit and, dare I say, the accumulated amount of government debt by going back into that swamp with a swamp catcher and a gigantic machine available to you to hold all the money that's going to come rushing back to you by selling all the assets of all these crooks.
Wait, so are you saying that there's so much criminality going on that it's actually impacting the national debt?
Well, the annual government spending in total is $6.5 trillion a year. You know,
Yeah.
a lot of that's Social Security and transfer payments. But in terms of contracts, the stimulus program was close to $800 billion. Our total debt's $20 trillion. Let's say all that stimulus, I'm just making up numbers, let's round it up to $1 trillion. Let's say it's all crooked, and it's sitting there somewhere. It could be in the Caymans, it could be in America somewhere, it could be in
Panama.
houses. Sorry?
Panama?
We'll get to that in a second. And anyway, so this is an area, Victoria Tensig, this is an article written recently about a broadcast I listened to as it happened, where she said that this confidential informant, whose identity and right to testify came to be known immediately before the indictment of Manafort.
Yeah.
Right? So is there a relationship there? Was this indictment of Manafort rushed out to change the news cycle? Because as McCarthy points out, the indictment seems to have flaws in it. Was it rushed out there so that everybody on the CNN people who were leaked it and the other people who were leaked it could fan the flames and say, oh, Trump's on the road to impeachment now,
Right.
and distract us from this?
We'll talk about the leak, Charles. I know you were particularly disgusted by the FBI leaking this indictment information.
Well, when we go into the long history, sadly, of Bob Mueller and the people around Bob Mueller, the approach that he and others appear to have used in past prosecutions is to leak and to get the public all, up in arms at what a given defendant may have done. And, that's just a travesty of justice. The government, if that has happened here. Now, it sure seems as if somebody, I'm not saying Mueller himself, somebody on the team seems to have leaked information to CNN and to other news outlets that were able to report breathlessly as late on Friday that an indictment was coming. And you're not supposed to do that. And that's not one of those little trivial things like, a traffic ticket or whatever. I mean, when you leak this kind of information, you actually could be putting the government in a position where its case is impaired. You're certainly potentially harming Manafort and Gates and the other defendants. It just calls into question, what you're doing here. Is this a witch hunt?
So wait a minute. So you're saying by leaking the details of the Manafort indictment, whoever did that put the government's case against him in jeopardy?
Ultimately, if this bounces...
So why would he want to do that?
Well, because they thought what they were going to do is, the whole media complex would step in line and uniformly say, this is fantastic, and Trump's going to be impeached now, it's obstruction of justice, it's this, it's that, all this big balloon of stuff, this inferno would start blazing, and that hasn't happened, because perhaps people like you and other journalists and citizen journalists and others have said, no, wait a minute, this is not proper, what's going on here. And of course, Sean Hannity's been pounding the table, bless him, and others. So they may have thought this was back like the old days. If the news comes out, Jason Goodman's going to be indicted, and the next thing you know, your mother won't talk to you, and your friends won't talk to you, and your credit lines get cut, and all this. That's not what happened here yet.
It's interesting to see how, not necessarily this program alone, but the fact that so many people are popping up, everybody from, Alex Jones, Laura Loomer, you, I, Lionel, George Webb, everybody who's out there doing their own dissemination of information on the internet, I think we're really having an impact.
Oh, sure. Stefan Molyneux would be another one, and Mike Cernovich, and
there's many.
Jack with a name like
Jack Prosobic.
Yeah, okay, there you go.
Stranahan.
Yeah. So anyway, if we move on to the next one,
Jake Morphonios.
All right, now this is Jake Morphonios. This is, we're not going to go, this is the O Canada section of the broadcast.
Okay.
So,
will you sing?
No.
Okay.
Ixnay on that one. O Canada, the reason we're talking about this is Mother Jones. And, you know, this is, I think, the first Mother Jones article I've ever read. And it basically tries to make the case that there's absolutely nothing to the Clinton uranium scandal because for, among other reasons, uranium is, they don't say it quite this way, but there's actually a lot of uranium around, and we already have the nuclear weapons, and Russia has more than enough nuclear weapons to blow each other up many times over. And it tries to make the case that there's really nothing here, and especially because Frank Giustra sold out of his holdings in this thing before the transfer was made, and because you know they put a timeline together, and they try to argue that this is just right-wing insanity, and there's nothing to see here move along.
But isn't that totally not true?
As I pointed out, I sent this gentleman a short email. I'm sure he will respond to it instantly. I'm kidding, of course. And I decided that what we would do to mix it up a little with him and with Mother Jones, and to set the record straight, is to show our viewers exclusively now why the Canadian situation is a lot more serious than people have grown to understand. It is really quite a scandal. And we will now take you through some more elements that we haven't yet shared.
Okay.
So if we go, this is the famous New York Times treatment. And note the date of this. This is January 31st, 2008. Now, I spoke briefly to Jo Becker, who is a very she's a famous journalist and really very good and very thorough. And her partner in this article, Don Van Natta, is the person who wrote the book with Jeff Gerth, Her Way on Hillary Clinton. So these are very famous people.
This guy here is Frank Giustra, isn't it?
Frank Giustra, yeah. I don't know who the guy on the left must be the Kazakhstan leader, I guess. But if we go into the body of the article a little bit,
they are super excited to be friends with Bill Clinton.
Oh yeah. That's Tom Hunter on the left. Oh, the great Tom Hunter. All right. So look at this. Late on September 6, 2005, a private plane carrying the Canadian mining financier Frank Giustra touched down in Almaty in Kazakhstan. Now, September 6, 2005, okay? The Clinton Foundation, by that time frame, had been operating illegally an entity called Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Initiative, Inc., which was organized on March 24th, 2004. Okay? So whether Bill had met Frank before then or not, we get into this body a little bit further down, and we see that he is with Giustra, is Bill Clinton. They're on a 3-country philanthropic tour together, right? Clinton basically makes this dictator of Kazakhstan look good. And Giustra, and Hillary is a senator at this point, Giustra gets a valuable deal. All right, stuns the mining industry. You see, this is the New York Times, you know. This is
2008.
This is 5. The
2005.
The article is written in 8, but this is in 2005. All right? So just months after the pact was finalized, it says, Mr. Clinton's charitable foundation received its own windfall, a $31.3 million donation from Mr. Giustra. Now,
oh wow, this is even bigger than the cash flow to the Clinton Foundation amid Uranium One deal.
That's why I'm bringing it up.
Yeah, and I haven't seen this article before.
Right, so this is $31.3 million supposedly from somebody connected to Giustra, okay? And has remained a secret until Mr. Giustra acknowledged it last month, which means December 2007, okay? $31.3 million. Now, the Times sometimes is sloppy with numbers, but generally speaking, the Times and Jo Becker and Don Nutt are very, very thorough. So the question is, let us assume that this $31.3 million is US dollars, okay?
Could be Canadian.
It could be Canadian, and we'd have to then check and see whether the Canadian dollar was stronger or weaker in the time frame. But anyway, let's just assume it's US dollars, right?
Still a lot of dough.
A lot of do-re-mi. So we have the ability, and for the crowdsourced community to look, thanks to the Clintons, to look at their tax filings for 2005 and 2006 and see, is there an amount listed there, $31.3 million? And let's go to the 2005, which is the next link.
I was just bringing up a map of Almaty, Kazakhstan. I think a lot of people are unfamiliar with the layout.
It's getting cold over there. Maybe you should spend Christmas over there.
But isn't it like the super richest uranium part of the world? There's not much going on Google Earth. I should have checked that before I brought it up.
That's right.
Anyway, we'll do the
This is
wonderful accounting report from our friends at BKD.
right, BKD. We might be able to do a BKD mug or something.
Yeah.
All right, so this is a fraudulent accounting report. Okay, it makes it seem as if it's a real one, but it's not. Okay, it is not done in accordance with the United States generally accepted accounting standards, but it's made to pass off as if it might be. It's dated June 9th, 2006. Okay, and it actually has. If we go to the next page, there are a lot of things that are wrong with this. But if you see the revenues, gains, and other support, the total shown is $99 million on the right. 99,667,782. That's the total amount of revenue into the Clinton Foundation, according to this audit, which was finished in June of 2006, June 9th, 2006, right?
Yeah.
So file that away.
Pretty good.
File that, and then we keep going. We get through this pack of lies audit, which is just hopeless. Stop for a sec, if you will. This is the cash flow statement where they restate, they claim, 2004 results. And we will be demonstrating this weekend, exclusively on your show, why this is a fraud, why this has been purposefully altered to mask the fact that $64 million was stolen from the Clinton Foundation in 2004, minimum.
By who?
We don't know that yet, but that's something which Mueller should have been able to figure out way back when. But you could figure it out. They could figure it out. The FBI can figure it out now, even if records have been burned, okay? Because they're counterparties to the transaction. So we keep on going, and we get to the tax filing. The 9B, it's going to be several pages after this. You're almost there. You're almost home. Okay, that's the supplementary information. All right, here's the tax filing. Now we look at this tax filing for the year 2005 for the William J. Clinton Foundation and keep going down.
Where are these guys? They're in Arkansas, BKD.
Right. They're all over the Midwest and South. They have a office, though, in Little Rock.
Should we call them and ask them what happened?
I don't think that would be fruitful.
They won't answer.
No. All right, this is a request for extra time. Oh, no, this is a signature authorization. Keep going. All right, there you go. Okay. Remember I told you $99 million in total revenue for the Clinton Foundation?
Yes.
All right, now we look here. This is revenue, expenses, and changes in net assets. This is their official tax filing. And we look at the very bottom. What number do we come up with? Total revenue is line 12?
82 million.
Is that the same as 99 million?
So about 17 million shy.
Right. Now, the reason for this difference is that they have omitted the results for their illegal HIV/AIDS operation on this tax form, and they've omitted it from their website, but I have it.
How did you get it?
We got it.
Yeah.
By asking for it, actually. But so we have it, and multiple people have it. And so this, you can't do that. You can't have a tax form that says 82 million is your revenue, and an audit that says, no, it's 99, with no explanation. I mean, there's, what happened, right? But if we keep on going down, we're going to get to something called Schedule B, which the Clintons made a mistake of disclosing on their website. The IRS, mind you, has the Schedule B information in full. Schedule B is a list of your major donors. Here's Schedule A.
Right.
This has some interesting stuff in it, but we don't need to. We'll focus on it on the weekend. But Schedule B is shortly going to be appearing. Here it is. So pause if we can at the top here. This is your schedule of contributors, right? And they claim here that they're a 501c3 organization. All right, and you go down a little bit, and you'll see you have to disclose information concerning any donor who gave 2% or more. It says here, contribution of the greater of 5,000 or 2% of the revenues, right? So 2% is going to be either 2 million or 1.6 million or more. So they list out the donors. Here's one for 5 million. Here's one, 4.273.
But there's no name or address.
Well, the IRS has these names, but the important thing is the amount. We're looking for 31.3 million.
Aha, okay.
All right? There's 46.2, and that's probably all of the small donors. There's 46.2. There's 4.3, 41,000. These are the 10 million, 68.
It's a lot.
But that's it. There's no 31.3 in 2005.
So what does that mean?
All right. So did Justra give 31.3 in 2005 or not?
Well, what if it was part of that 48 or 41 or whatever?
No, 46 is most likely going to be. 46 is going to have to be small donations aggregated.
How can you tell?
Well, because in this year they raised money for the Clinton-Bush-Haiti Fund. Clinton-Bush-Katrina Fund, or Bush-Clinton-Katrina Fund, and they disclose how much that was. That was like 28 million or something. And as a guess, in other filings in subsequent years, what they do, they shouldn't do it this way, but they give you on this form, they say, this is an amount of all of our small donations combined. So as a guess, the 46 million is not Justra. And Justra, if he gave 31.3, it would have to show up here. And here's a little news flash, Mr. Trump. The IRS has the information here for this year. They have this filled out. They have the identities of each donor, the address, listed in this form. It's whited out in the version that the Clintons have shown to the public. But the IRS has had this information ever since this form appeared in the IRS offices whenever it was filed. It shows here December 20th, 2006, but that's impossible because the form would have had to be in on the 15th of November, 2006. So we have actually a separate version of this form. We won't go into it now because it would take too much time, but we have the form they filed with the IRS, and it was filed in November 2006. We have that via ProPublica. So just continuing to the next exercise, the next link, let's see if there's 31.3 in this one, right?
This is another
This
tax.
is 2006.
Okay.
So we scroll all the way to Schedule B if we can do that.
Can we just search for 31?
Oh, no, it won't work that way. Just because I'll just tell you there is no 31.3. But
Eliminate any suspense?
but let's go and look, so you
Sure.
can just see for yourselves.
So Schedule B is what we're after, right?
It's going to be a good 25 pages past here.
So obviously they're
Oh, here we
very
go.
confident, Charles, that nothing's going to happen to them, or they wouldn't be posting all these things with all these, this is like the evidence of the crime is right here on the internet.
It's always been here. That's the thing. It's not like it's tough to find this. I mean, however you send a rocket up the IRS posterior and you say, listen, bring this stuff over to my office post haste, forthwith. All right, here we go. Schedule B. We're looking for what? 31.3 million.
You say no.
Oh, well, let's see. All right, we got 45.3. That's not right.
Yep.
31.3.
So wait a minute. I thought you said it wasn't there.
Keep going.
What are we looking for?
All right, there is a 31.3 there. Let's go back to it. All right, but there's no HIV/AIDS
Where would
in
that be?
2006 because it was merged out of legal existence. There's the 31.3 in the paper, okay, but he gave it for HIV/AIDS. And there was no HIV/AIDS operation in 2006 that was lawfully organized.
It's quite
Big problem. Very, very big problem. It's a big problem also because in Canada, the laws are such that you have to, as a Canadian citizen, you could not make a donation to a charity that operates outside Canada unless that, first of all, you had to take the deduction against your U.S. taxes, and secondly, that entity had to be lawfully controlled, which of course, the HIV/AIDS operation of the Bill Clinton Foundation There's never been, they have never shown to the public their application
So
for
it's
federal
not
tax
lawfully
exemption.
controlled.
They never got their determination letter. They've never shown that to the public. They palmed off on the public the idea that there was a merger that took place at the end of the year, but you can't merge one charity that has been operating illegally with another charity that doesn't exist and create a legal charity. You can't do that.
Two illegal entities don't make a legal one.
Right, it's a chicken and chicken, etc. Now, if we to understand why, and I'm not expecting people to absorb this all in this one broadcast, but if you look at the next link, okay, this is an old memo, but the principles in it mostly still apply today, and it's worth. This is a U.S. memo, written, an IRS group wrote it. And it explains, among other things, and it's a fairly lengthy document, it explains that international activities of a charitable organization have to be tightly controlled from a U.S. base, right? And they actually have to further valid tax-exempt operations. You can't, you and I, we've talked about it before, but maybe we have new listeners. You can't form up, I like to go to Brazil. And we can't, you and I, set up a charity. You probably like to go to Brazil too. And we can't set up the Brazilian charity, which is really nothing other than a way for you and I to put money into a charity, take a tax deduction, arrive down in Brazil and have a nicer hotel room in Rio or whatever.
I think there are a lot of people in Brazil who could use our help.
Yeah, exactly. Right, it's such a selfless undertaking. But this memo is really worth reading. You have to have tight controls, and most importantly, the thing has to be controlled from a U.S. base. Similar approaches apply up in Canada. Go to the next memo. This is a really humorous memo, especially when you think about the usual suspects choice that we had. There's actually a memo here about explaining why that you would have to write a memo explaining why a charity cannot engage in illegal activities or activities that are contrary to public policy. Does tell me that perhaps we do have a little bit too much time on our hands down and around the IRS. But this explains, and actually there's some very humorous examples that, the mafia tried to set up a charity and there was a case about it that, no, a mafia can't control the charity or whatever.
Wow.
And similarly, you can't have a charity that is distributing adulterated drugs that nobody's checked around the world by people who have had problems lying under oath and obstructing justice while they were in high positions, using fundraising firms that have been sanctioned for not registering, and out of a charity that itself has been sanctioned for not registering. You can't do all that.
What happened to those people who got sorry to use that phrase, but the people who got the drugs from Ramboxy? It was AIDS patients in Africa, right? They died, I guess?
Well, we may never actually know. So what happened there is that it's one of these things where the truth may be so sordid and so diabolical that people just really don't want to know, whereas I think the reverse is the case. I think the real truth should be known here, and what I suspect the truth is that this bunch of crooked Indian people, and I have many wonderful Indian friends, and I hope to go back to that country, but there are crooks over there. There are a lot of people, and if they're the same proportion of crooks in India as there are in the United States,
that's a lot of crooks.
There are 4 times as many crooks in India as there are in the United States, because there's 4 times as many people. So, these crooks saw in Ranboxy, which was a big company, one of a gem in an Indian context. I think it was revenues of almost $1 billion, a majority of which were in the U.S. They had a problem, and they needed somebody to help them look respectable. And that person was Bill Clinton, who had a problem, and also Rajat Gupta had a problem. So what they did is they got together, each hand needed the other, and McKinsey was hired to come up with this visionary plan to help run Boxy. Chelsea was hired by McKinsey. The Clinton family were paid off personally in ways that are not disclosed in the Clinton Foundation filings, but which are available publicly through a company called MindSpirit LLC. We talked about that last week, or last Sunday, a little bit. We gave the link in the last set of slides.
Right.
And they got together, and it was just a horrible situation where these Indians were manufacturing drugs, and they realized nobody would check. And they distributed these drugs around the world. Those that may have gotten into patients could very well have killed them.
Certainly didn't cure anything.
Yeah, and it also undermines the integrity of the whole drug distribution system around the world. And what are these, supposedly, you hear all this stuff about the Hippocratic Oath.
Yeah.
Your father's a doctor. I mean, is it in fact the Hippocratic Oath? In this case, you hear these people who are so smart around these medical schools, and Chelsea has a PhD in public health and all this stuff. How could you get together and operate this thing and accept the word of a for-profit generics company in far-off India without actually testing? And then after all these problems, it's not like it just out of the blue came a problem. There were multiple FDA warnings and red sirens and signals. And it first came to everyone's attention in 2004, August 2004, but it wasn't until May of 2013, 9 years later, that Rod Rosenstein, enters into this $500 million supposedly victory against Ranbaxy 9 years later. Why did it take 9 years? And in that 9-year period, we had the Bush administration bragging about sending tens of billions of dollars through PEPFAR to buy drugs. How many of those drugs that were purchased were adulterated? Yeah, we should add a few more names there.
Well, that's what I was just going to say, is that Periscope wants you to add McCabe to this list, and we would need a bigger lineup there. But
we could let's take suggestions. We've got a lot of people in the crowdsourced community. Let's come up with some better ones.
This could be a whole series of T-shirts, Charles.
Right. So then we go to the next memo. I know we're taking more time than we thought, as usual, but
that's all right. This is important information.
All right. So this is an excellent firm up in, as they say up there, Toronto. They kind of run it all to Toronto. But anyway, but this is really...
Isn't that where the mayor was smoking crack?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff.
What was that dude's name? Ron
I think
Ford?
I think he's still dead.
Still dead, yeah.
But this is a very good firm. And there are several articles in this section that explain that Canadian law is actually tougher than American law, okay, when it comes to charities. And so the reason I suggested that we put this link up for people who are not familiar with Canadian law is that there's no way the deductions that Justra may have taken against, if it was U.S. income in 2005 or 6 or whenever it was, if that was his 31.3 million, there's no way it's legitimate, right? Because,
How do you mean?
Because the Clinton Foundation was not lawfully organized and operated on that date, and you can't claim that you gave that amount of money to a charity and then subsequently be so brilliant that you didn't know about it and agreed to serve as a director of the parent company, and subsequently in 2007, before then, agreed to enter into a joint venture. There's something wrong with this picture, right?
Well, what do you presume was going on with that 31 million?
Well, I wonder if that money ever actually left Canada.
So he just says he gave it to them, and
I wonder. If there are no control, that's the kind of stuff you can do, and that's why this is so serious. If you have a charity that is not tightly controlled and you're prepared to be crooked, you could basically defraud the government of Canada, defraud the government of the United States by alleging that money's left you
and then
claiming
pay taxes on it.
You get a tax deduction. In the U.S., you get a tax deduction, so you don't have to pay as much in the way of tax. And it's a lesser benefit up in Canada, but nonetheless, this is an area where people should be jumping up and down and screaming, and there's no good reason for Frank Justra to be staying involved with this from 2005 to the present.
He likes money.
Well, if we go to the next one.
That's a good reason.
Was that the next one? Yeah, okay. So this is something that was brought to my attention recently, that the Trudeau family, and now of course Justin Trudeau is the son of Pierre, is...
I thought he was Castro's son. You don't buy that?
No. Anyway, they have a foundation up there, Trudeau Foundation, and the Trudeaus are very close with the Clintons, and the suspicion I have is that have the Clintons taught this young Justin Trudeau some of their own tricks?
Yeah.
And is it the fact, possibly, that the reason that the Trudeau government won't get the money back that has been given to the Clinton Foundation by Bill's own admission starting in 2002, the Canadian citizens and the Canadian government started sending money supposedly to help fight HIV/AIDS in 2002. Why are you going here?
You haven't seen these photographs, or have you?
I have not.
I mean, I think you need to take a look at this. He looks mighty similar to Fidel Castro. Also, this is his mom.
Right.
That's Fidel. That's Justin.
Where did you find that?
That's from Canadian Broadcasting Company. And there's his dad and Castro. And
yeah, it's stunning. Yeah. Stranger things have happened.
that's Castro pretty young right there.
Huh.
See that?
That's interesting.
Isn't it? Oh, this is the most compelling one. That's Castro right there.
Wow.
Fidel Castro, Justin Trudeau. He looks just like him.
Huh.
I mean,
Interesting.
if
Well,
you look exactly like somebody and he was hanging out with your mom in the year you were born, that's a little suspicious to me. Sorry to throw off your vibe there, Charles.
That's all right. Can we go back to my vibe?
Yes, sorry. I know you had a slide going here.
Next one.
Sorry. I like
All
to
right.
interject these, somewhat controversial topics.
All right. So we're going to study this foundation carefully to see whether it gave any money to the Clinton Foundation or Clinton operations. But here we have, a dynastic political family, right? We have Pierre Trudeau and now his son, maybe his son, his wife's son. Now leading that country, and we have the strange predicament that despite the fact that there are many, many academic memos and that in whatever articles, peer-reviewed articles that suggest the Canadian government gave a lot of money to the Clinton Foundation to fight HIV/AIDS, despite in face of all this evidence, Justin Trudeau just announced that I think it's 20 million Canadians going to be sent to the Clinton Health Access Initiative out of a larger pool. With all these defects, why is he so reluctant to understand what's really going on, and so reluctant to get money back from the Canadian citizens who need it desperately? I mean, the Canadian government is not exactly flush with cash now. The oil prices and gas prices being diminished, with the social welfare costs rising, and we need to ask some very tough questions, crowdsourcers, especially those of you in Canada. What's happening? And we keep going to the next one.
Well, I have a serious question, though, while we're still on this Pierre Trudeau Foundation. So it's like all these guys have foundations, all these big government ex-presidents and whatever, they've got their foundations. And then something else that I've noticed is that a lot of people that we are investigating who are not necessarily ex-presidents or whatever, they have 501c3 charities. So there's something here where everybody likes to have these nonprofit, either a foundation or a 501c3. Stephen Paddock had this foundation, the Paradise Ranch, and then there's a Paradise Ranch that's a 501c3 in Henderson, Nevada, that was like a horse ranch for, I think, learning disabled or underprivileged kids or whatever. But yet, why do you have horses inside a warehouse, in like a warehouse facility, rather than somewhere in the mountains in Nevada?
Yeah, I think if we stay on the issue of presidents and their foundations.
Yeah.
And that I don't want to get to quite yet.
Okay.
Yeah. If we can just keep it in the order that it's up there, if it's okay. So this foundation is the equivalent of or sort of like the Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea Clinton Foundation. That a former president, former leader of a country would set up a foundation. I think that is a very bad idea, right? That's a very bad idea, particularly when it involves dynastic families, because this is just a way, if they're not going to be checked, and if you're going to get big tax deductions, what you're doing is you're just making it a lot easier for people who would otherwise support your political campaign to route money to this foundation, to claim victory, to gain a personal benefit, to increase your notoriety. And quite frankly, the number of great causes, great underfunded causes that are out there in 2017 is a very small number. There's a lot of money. In the U.S. alone, something like $2 trillion a year is sent towards charities. $2 trillion a year. To put that number in perspective, that's bigger than the gross domestic product of probably all but, 8 or 9 countries in the world.
Wow.
We just spend that on charity.
Wow.
Right. So, and that's just our country. Other countries spend it as well. So if we have this approach that, Jason, you're going to be our president, you're going to have a lot of fun. Air Force One, we just spruced it up for you. We got Marine One, we got Camp David, we got whatever. Any country you want to go to, restaurants, movies, stars, whatever, the food is great, booze is better. You're just going to pretend that you're the president. And the reality is that behind you are going to be all these people with the levers to start making the important decisions.
I'd be shot immediately.
And then you get out, and you're going to live like a king. I mean, why should you have to stay in the La Quinta Inn? You're going to be jetting around the world. Obama now has this thing in Chicago with Prince Henry. He's Harry of England.
Right.
They're going to just once a year we're going to have these global summits, and it's going to be a big choom gang session where we won't smoke because you can't do that in Chicago legally. But
they'll import hot dogs.
Yeah, but they'll go to or they'll have the session in Colorado, I guess, or whatever other states you can smoke dope.
Well, so wait, serious question though. Back to the foundations. So, I mean, is it just as simple as they create this foundation so that his son can then run for president of Canada and everybody can funnel money through that?
Well, you've asked a good question. So yes, I think it's exactly that simple. And if we go to the next slide, next link. This is a must-read article. This is in Counterpunch. Now, Counterpunch is not a right-wing plug or whatever you call it. I mean, it is, I believe, quite a left-leaning progressive bunch of people. And you read about this. Not only do we have a problem with the Trudeau Foundation, but the finance minister, Bill Morneau, is somehow connected, and is the second most powerful person in Canada, is named in the Panama Papers, has a firm, their family business is organizing these companies around the world, has his own foundation.
Everybody's got a foundation.
Right?
Why don't you start the Charles Ortel Foundation?
Who says I didn't? But anyway, and you see, he's the executive chair of Morneau Chappelle, the pension and investments consulting firm he inherited from his father. There's Lennox Corporate Services to set up a tax evasion scheme in the Bahamas.
Wow. Wow.
You
And
find
this guy's
Morneau
the
is not
what?
alone. So
What is this guy?
He's the finance minister of Canada.
Oh my God.
Right? So currently the finance minister of Canada.
He's a straight criminal.
Well, I mean, it's certainly very, very suspicious.
I'll say.
So you have this Trudeau is not willing to chase money that his predecessor has given to the Clintons. Mm-hmm. His finance guy seems to have all kinds of suspect ties.
Justin Trudeau, he's very similar to Barack Obama in certain regards, in that he's just this sort of like young, hip, good-looking guy who they made president, and just everybody has got like a generally good perception of him, and then he can do whatever the hell he wants.
You do recall, Jason Goodman, would you like to be president?
Hey.
Pretend president. I think that could be what... Anyway, so if we go to the next link, and this one you should read in some depth, but I happen to recall, first of all, the Clintons are spending a lot of time in Canada. They are collecting speech fees up there.
I thought they were hanging out with Frank Giustra.
Maybe, but they also are spending a fair amount of time in Quebec.
Is that where they did the Uranium One deal?
No, I don't think so. But Quebec, I tried to buy a company up there once, and the laws are, it's very tough up there, and that's the French-speaking part, and the laws are slightly different. And
right.
And there is a suspicion that the Clintons have either bought property or are thinking about buying property. It says Hillary Clinton is moving to Quebec.
Would that be, well, you could be extradited
Well,
from
it's
Canada.
funny. I spoke to a top person in Canada this morning, and I asked that question. I said, well, wait a minute. We have strict, close ties. And he said, Charles, not so fast. He said, actually, when you look into it, that the Quebec people might very well protect somebody who wanted to flee this country. And I'll show you in the next memo, next thing there. This is a memo that I found. There are others that explain that Canada does
refuse to extradite.
Yeah, and has different views of certain aspects. And I mean, it's certainly there's a spy novel that you would have, a former president, aspiring president. Question is, would Chelsea leave or stay? And if she left, would Mesvinsky go with her?
I think an apartment in Quebec would be way nicer than one on Rikers Island.
Yeah, it's a little cold up there. But anyway, so there's this Canadian person put that bug in my ear, and I just thought I was surprised to see that there would be any question of whether we would tolerate, a fugitive from American justice going up to Canada, and that we wouldn't try to get that person back.
You just drive there.
Well, now that I remember, of course, during the Vietnam War, there were a lot of people who went up to Canada. You would go up to Canada. So maybe, anyway, that was interesting. Then we go to the next one. We're almost done, folks. Yeah, this is
Same
200.
guy.
No, it's a different. This is a recent. The same guy. This is a $200 fine. Not all that significant, but
it looks like the tie might be $200. Why would they hit this guy with a $200 fine? That's ridiculous. I mean, it's like a parking ticket.
Well, exactly. You see, you have this issue of if you set a standard where the leader of a country is not subject to the laws of that country, then you are basically enshrining a criminal culture. Because you're saying, if we've got the leader on something and we let him off, then the leader's under our thumb, and then we can always bring what we have back out, and then we'll go, he did it, so we're going to do it.
Yeah, but that doesn't seem to be quite right, because even in the case with Trump, even if he hasn't done anything, they just say, oh, look, piss dossier. He did it. Right.
Well, that's a different story. But we're now on the North American wing of the dynastic political family, crime syndicate. Now, if we go to the next one, then we're done, I guess. We're done.
Yeah, we're done. There were some things in True Pundit, I think, that we wanted to review.
Yeah, the other way. There was down 3, I think. That one, FBI agents.
Quietly told to stop investigating Vegas shooter Paddock's travels and cash linked to terrorism hotbeds.
This True Pundit is breaking a lot of great stuff, and I don't get it. I mean, at the inception of this project back in February of 2015, I was told by an experienced hand that, within any organization, there are good and bad people. There are good FBI people, bad FBI people, good CIA people, bad CIA. But this just reeks to me. I mean, in this day and age, I think the FBI agents, the line agents, just as Donald Trump and General Mattis changed the rules of engagement for fighting war, I think the Trump team needs to make it very clear to the FBI and very clear to the CIA that the old way of doing things is finito. And there's going to be transparency. There's going to be a respect for the charter of each of the FBI, CIA, and all the other security agencies that are going to be protecting Americans, not spying on Americans. And, when things like this happen, the American public deserves to know what was really going on with the Vegas shooter. And it just, the story, to have this, still be up in the air where we don't really know what's going on is ridiculous.
It just changed yesterday, and actually I was so impressed by True Pundit, because they had run a story days ago about how there was gunfire in Paddock's room from either the FBI or the cops. This was another thing. The FBI had previously interviewed the New York City truck terrorist. So I found that very interesting. But this is what I wanted to show you. The Las Vegas sheriff, Lombardo, he had to change his story, and he admitted that the True Pundit expose about the SWAT team firing the gun in Paddock's hotel room was true. So we should have mentioned True Pundit before when we were talking about independent journalism and how it's really having an impact, because of course we're not hearing the truth about what's going on in Las Vegas. I mean, that's just evident by the fact that these guys keep changing their story.
Yeah.
Quite crazy, Charles.
Well, the good news is it's more work for you.
Right. Anything else we want to cover on this special Wednesday edition of Sunday with Charles?
We did want to put up that countdown clock.
Oh, of course, of course. It's getting very close. Now, are we going to have some kind of special event on November the 15th?
Maybe the 16th, because that would be, I think, the 16th would be today, are we the 1st today? Yeah.
Yeah, today is November 1st,
So
and the
the-
16th is going to be...
Well, the 15th would be 2 weeks from today. So maybe we could,
Maybe schedule some sort of event.
yeah, we could. And so here, just a quick summary for the viewers to remind you. Now we're 14 days away. Now, I don't know how many of the viewers have actually been involved putting together audited financial statements and tax returns for nonprofit corporations. But when you do it, it's quite a process.
I would imagine.
What you have to do is the management's responsible, working with the trustees or the directors, for preparing a first draft of and providing the books and records. And if it's a real audit, the auditor gets in there and checks everything, flies around the world to all the different operations and tests this and tests that and looks at all, especially all the bank records. And you get back from the auditor what's typically called a management representation letter. A draft of a letter comes from the auditor where they say, you know, it typically can be, for the Clinton Foundation, it would probably run to 150 pages as a guess, but because you'd have to, or longer, you'd have to go through all the subsidiaries, and it would say, "Dear Mr. CEO of the Clinton Foundation, you hereby represent and warrant to us the following. 1, we have noticed this anomaly in, in Mozambique, in your subsidiary there, and you represent to us that you have undertaken to fix this problem. It's a temporary problem. You've hired XYZ law firm to solve it. There's nothing from the government agency saying that you will be put out of business, and you're just going to pay a fine or something like that." There's a long list of those kind of things, and you fight with them. You say, no, you can't ask me to sign this. Take that out. I'm not going to do that.
Or you negotiate.
No, you fight typically. It's really, you go and it's knockdown, drag out discussions, and you threaten to fire the auditor and back and forth. I mean, that kind of stuff can happen. And so if you want to meet this deadline, lawfully, trustees, and I'm speaking now to Cheryl Saban, I know you're listed as having multiple foundations, and Hadil Ibrahim, who is, I think, the daughter of Muhammad Ibrahim. Both of you are very wealthy. Either you're connected to wealth or you're very wealthy yourselves. And when this Clinton Foundation goes down, and when people will get sued, and I'm not talking about me, I'm talking about the people who are going to be upset that they themselves are going to have to pay penalties and interest. They will be suing trustees as a guess for reckless behavior. If you don't do the work you're supposed to do now, you are only adding to your potential criminal and financial liabilities. And you only have 14 days, and I guess 8 hours, to get these forms correct. And in order to get them correct, I don't think you can just correct, a few recent years. I think you have to file tax returns for 1997, which were never filed, and then you've got to correct all the other tax returns and, try to put this right. And you don't have a lot of time to do it, and there's no grounds to get extra time. There's no way legally to get any extra time past that deadline.
Wow.
So if you want to add your name to the list of the usual suspects, by all means do.
Out the shot, man,
right. By all means do it. And by the way, it's not just the trustees. Price Waterhouse, you know better. You know because I warned you. You know because I retained copies of my warning, specifically warn you with details. You know you should never have accepted this assignment in the first place, because by the time you got into it, this foundation was in a position where it couldn't be audited because BKD had done so much horrible work. Right? You law firms who are around this, if there are law firms around this, don't think that it's going to work for you to just start with December 31st, 2009 and ignore the Kamiki Gibson memo and ignore other things in the file. Ignore that joint use and operating agreement, which maybe the Clintons haven't shown you yet. Maybe you haven't taken a good look at the City of Little Rock Parks and Recreation Department bonds that were issued in 1998. You want to look at that official statement, which I have.
Wow.
And the lease between Little Rock and the Clinton Foundation, March 1st, 2002. You have to look at all these things where the Clinton Foundation covenanted for long periods of time to behave in a certain way and where it didn't, as you try to form your opinion of whether this is a lawfully, validly organized and operated operation. So, Jason, it's been a treat to talk with you about the usual suspects.
Always.
Your work is fantastic here. I don't know if we don't have a T-shirt to show anybody, but
well, what we can do is I can add this to the Crowdsource the Truth merchandise store, and of course, if people like the Usual Suspects graphic. It's not on there right now, but I can add it this afternoon. There's a ton of lovely merchandise available for purchase there on the Crowdsource the Truth merchandise store, and the link to that, of course, is available at the head of most of the videos. And Charles, you've got one of the lovely items right there.
Yeah, sure.
You've got the Podfather Mug. So perhaps while we're, hoping that Tony Podesta and John Podesta get some well-deserved jail time, people could enjoy their coffee.
That's
from
right.
The Podfather Mug. And then, of course, some people object to having most of the money go to a product or something like that. And if people enjoy Crowdsource the Truth and they like watching Sunday with Charles, whether it's on a Tuesday or a Wednesday or whatever it is, you can become sponsors of the channel. We've got 681 people watching us right now. Probably should be at work, but that's okay. It's good that they're watching the program. And there's over 20,000 people subscribed to Crowdsource the Truth's YouTube channel right now. 12.1 thousand Twitter followers, over 7,000 people on the Facebook group. If even 10% of those people who are in the Crowdsource community became monthly sponsors on patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth for just $1 a month, less than the price of a cup of coffee, as Sally Struthers would say, that would help keep Crowdsource the Truth financially viable. It will allow us to keep doing this type of investigative journalism. The work that you're doing is just tremendous, Charles. I'm blown away every week by the array of documents that you've got access to, that you've found, that you're bringing to everyone's attention. It's really stunning. We have got to see justice done. We've got to see some criminal prosecution of these individuals if we have any hope of maintaining a justice-oriented society.
And if I may say, Utrice Lead over at Progressive Radio Network has been very kind to me and actually allowed me to plug to her listeners Crowdsource the Truth, which I did.
Great.
And she comes out of a progressive background, but like all of us, whether we're conservative, progressive, or agnostic on politics, nobody I know of is in favor of charity fraud. I mean,
of course not.
Maybe that guy who plays Gilbert Gottfried, on Beverly Hills Cop. Maybe a guy like that would be in favor of charity fraud. But most people are against it, and to see the usual suspects protect one another is just revolting. And I beg Donald Trump and our Department of Justice, governments around the world, put the pressure on these people. Don't think it's a good idea any longer to hide this. Expose it. Let us absorb the enormity of what these people did. Let us force them to make recompense. And if people, even powerful former presidents and aspiring presidents, need to see jail time, we have Corinne Brown, who's now asked for another delay in her sentencing till February. I don't think she's going to get a delay.
300 and something years.
Some large number of years, but she's saying on health reasons she wants a delay in sentencing till next February. And, we can imagine how that's going to work.
Is she worried that 335 years from now she won't be that healthy? For health reasons, she can't spend the rest of her life in jail?
Right.
I understand that.
Right.
Now, Charles, we're going to be introducing a new show next week. And on Sunday, we're going to have a special guest. Can you give the folks a preview of what you're going to talk about on Sunday?
With him, or?
Well, just in general, or if you're not.
Sure. Well, what I would say is at present, things change, and if we have new developments between now and Sunday, we will definitely be covering those off. But my goal on this coming Sunday is to give the prosecutors who may be listening more ammunition and more gumption, frankly. So here's some serious facts that maybe Comey and maybe Mueller just swept under the rug.
Maybe.
Maybe. Giving them the benefit of the 2004 or 5 time frame. We're not going to sweep them under the rug. We're going to take him out from under the rug. We're going to take off the dust. And those are some nice rings on Comey's finger there. And we're going to show them to you. And it may be a fairly lengthy exercise. I'm going to try to make it easy for people who are not comfortable with numbers, but we're going to have to get into some numbers. And we're going to take people step by step through a few key pieces, which after you understand these numbers, you will come away and say, and these facts in the law, you say, there's no way that somebody trained in charity law and trained in criminal law and trained in accounting would have gotten on the inside as happened and say, oh yeah, this is fine. Yeah, no problem. Give them a pass. When they're going to put Corinne Brown away for $800,000. I mean, the Clinton Foundation spends more than $800,000 every day, right? You know,
that's just the strip club bill. But in all seriousness, we did have 2 companies that you've spoken about that came up in conversation with Field McConnell and David Hawkins. They've been talking about Boeing and GE.
Right. So there's an excellent guy I met named Jan Weinberg, is I think the person you're referring to. And Jan's a really interesting guy in that he's a child, I would say, of the 60s, 1960s. And he was very much in the peace movement. He's anti-war, very comfortable in the Occupy Wall Street group and all that kind of stuff. He's a business executive by day, a private business executive, his own businesses. But he's very much interested, and he's very much against, he and I connected because he was very much against the reflexive support that the Clintons, and for that matter the Bushes, and even the Obama presidency gave to the deep state, the unregulated deep state and the defense establishment. And so he went at this slightly different way, and he noticed, either he or his associates attended the annual meetings of GE and Boeing, where it was revealed one way or another around that GE and Boeing had email communications with the Clinton Foundation in regard to either projects or contributions that each company was doing independently with Clinton Foundation entities. And you remember the ruse here from the Clintons is that all work-related emails have been turned over to the US government, but there are no such emails where there's a Boeing name or a GE name tied to the Clinton Foundation in anything that Jan has seen or I've seen or anybody's seen that is out there, the official stuff that's in the public domain. Now maybe some of it has been held and is this kind of stuff that Tom Fitton's trying to get out of Judicial Watch.
He's been very frustrated lately, Tom Fitton.
Well, he's very determined as well, and I think he will, his mission will win in the end. But so this fellow Jan has done a lot of work. He has free time and financial resources, and he has the wherewithal to get his arms around all this. So he's going to join the presentation briefly, I think, this coming Sunday, and then thereafter he's going to do a detailed show taking you through this. And he does have a lot of very interesting ideas. He's a great human being.
Super nice guy, very smart. And Charles, while you're speaking about work-related emails, it just brought to memory our magnum opus of just a few weeks ago that, as you said, hasn't gotten quite the attention that we might have expected it would get. And why don't I take us out of the program with that, and we can just play for everybody the wonderful Charles' initial meeting with Mrs. Bill.
That's great. Hey, Mrs. Bill.
Hello, Charles. I'm writing work-related emails to John Podesta.
Is this the Chappaqua Data Center? Where's Brian Pagliano?
You've got mail.
Maybe it's from Puma Abedin. Oh no, it's from Trey Gowdy.
We had 2 here. The ARB nor the previous congressional investigations had access to your emails, did they?
Didn't you already turn over all those emails?
I don't know what you're referring to.
Maybe you better clean it with this. Oh no, Mrs. Bill!
That was some weird shit.
Well, and with that, Charles, I think we will bid the audience adieu for now. I've got another broadcast coming up later today with our friend Lee Stranahan.
Oh, please give him my best.
I will. We'll be talking about the JFK files and various other things. But until then, I want to thank everyone for tuning in, and I'll see you on Sunday.
Looking forward to it, Jason. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles.